All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pursuit of Relentless podcast. You've got your host, Alaina. And today I have a fellow coworker, AKA the person I'm chasing to my next promotion. But this is Ben Hilborn. I'm super excited for you guys to get access to him. And this guy I've just been watching. We've been in business for a couple of years now together, and just watching his growth and his personal development and the way that he's been able to develop himself, I think is super inspiring. And I'm excited for you guys to get access to his story. So welcome to the show, Ben.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Alaina.
Yeah, I'm pumped to have you. So tell us your story. If you were to run into us in the street and you're like, okay, this is how I got from zero to hero. This is what my journey's been like. It was obviously not just like a straight line successful human. And then boom, here we are today. So yeah, tell your story.
Yeah. So I'm in Edmonton, Alberta. That's where I live right now. I grew up here. Just like any kind of Canadian kid growing up, I played hockey my whole life as a jock, right? All the sports, hockey, and then kind of baseball in the summer is what I did. I guess basically what happened, I guess my life was I just committed to that. I ended up playing a pretty high level hockey. I played junior A for 4 years. And then after my junior career, kind of had a point in my life where I could either go college routes, I could go play in kind of the minor pros. I didn't get drafted to the NHL, so I would have had to go to the minors and work my way up, or kind of move on with my life and get a job. And so I came back as my 21-year-old's like summer, I guess, where I kind of had to make that defining, I guess, kind of decision, pretty big decision. And I ended up just getting a job that summer, handed out some resumes, got a job as a welder. Just randomly got a call, and the guy picked up my resume and said, "Hey, you're a hockey guy. Athletes are pretty good workers. Like, do you want to come be a welder? Like $20 an hour, no experience needed. Like, we'll get you started." I'm like, shit, okay, I guess so. Yeah, I'm like, I don't even know what a welder is. And so I did that, and then I never really got any opportunities that really made me want to keep pursuing hockey. And I kind of gave up the dream at that point. And I kind of interviewed some of the guys I played with in the past and talked to them about kind of the paths that they were going on, and if it was worth like going and playing in like the fourth division in France, or going down to like the SPHL in Florida and like playing that, and just the stories weren't really worth it. So I continued working. I got my apprenticeship through this company, and ended up, kind of long story short, worked a bunch of different jobs. I worked commercial. I worked in the shops. I worked up in Fort McMurray. I got my journeyman welding ticket. And then 2015 happened, this big crash in the oil here in Alberta. And at that point, I just got my ticket in February of 2015. And I thought, well, hey, I got a journeyman ticket. Like, I'll have work forever. Like, like I got my ticket. And that was kind of the furthest from, I guess, the truth on I guess, what would happen. But anyways, I was laid off that whole year, basically. Like I looked for work, but didn't really look for work because kind of simultaneously what was happening is I finished welding school in February, and then I actually qualified for this really cool race. It's called Red Bull Crash Ice in Edmonton. And so I was like a local guy. It was the first time the event was ever in Edmonton. And so I just kind of soaked that in for a month or two or whatever, like training for it, and took some interviews with newspapers. I had CTV follow me around training, all this kind of fun stuff. Cool. Yeah. And then what happened is after that ended, I tossed out some resumes, tried to look for some jobs. There's just nothing out there. And so long story short, I was on EI, right? Employment insurance. I was making like $2,000 a month. It's kind of like CERB recently what people were on. And I was like, well, shit, I'm not staying in Edmonton for the summer. I'm going to move to Kelowna. And so I moved to Kelowna with another hockey buddy of mine who was in the oil field, who also got laid off. So we moved out there, got a condo, and we just kind of lived it up. I had probably the best summer of my life because there was zero responsibility. We had money coming in every month, and we had to decide every day. We're like, "Oh man, do we go down to our pool? Do we go to the beach, or should we go boating with these friends that we made?" And we lived it up and just had the best summer ever. And through that, actually, kind of crazy circumstances, I got invited so my roommate played hockey in Medicine Hat. And one of the guys who he went to high school with out there, his girlfriend knew a guy who had a boat in Kelowna. Some guy's uncle or something had a boat. And they came to town. They're like, "You guys want to come boating with us?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure. Of course. Why not?" And so we hopped on this boat. And as we, we're hanging out, we're meeting everybody, and the guy who owned the boat, his nephew, I think is what it is, he ended up playing hockey. And so we were chatting hockey, and he was playing overseas. He was playing professional hockey overseas. And then he was actually working with World Financial Group on a part-time basis in Kelowna in kind of the off season. So, we got to know each other, hung out a couple times over the next couple of weeks. And he pulled the trigger and he said, "Hey man, like, what are you doing in Kelowna? Like, what do you do for work?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not working right now, man, but I'm a journeyman welder, like just waiting for Fort McMurray to open up again. I'll fly in and fly out." That was kind of the dream at that point, because I met guys when I was working up at Curl Oil Sands. I met guys who did that, like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off or whatever. That was the dream shift, to fly back into Kelowna for days off.
Mm-hmm.
But that just wasn't happening in 2015. So I kind of mentioned that. And then he asked me kind of the magic question. He's like, "Well, shit, like, do you keep your options open if something better were to come along for work? Or like, do you want to work in the oil field for the next 20 or 30 years? And I was like, I mean, I don't know. He's like, "Well, do you really enjoy it?" I'm like, "Oh, it's good money," right? For what I thought was good money back then, 102, 200 grand a year if you worked like crazy shifts or whatever. But, I didn't really commit to anything. He was really new too. So he didn't really know like how to explain everything or whatever. Like, he just got his license. And then what ended up happening was he followed up with me, got me in touch with his senior broker, which was somebody down in the Calgary office. And then she talked to me and then kind of explained, how brokers work and blah, 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 a little bit more in depth. And I was still just like, I don't know. Like, I don't know anything about money, like hockey player. And I worked in oil field.
And then I moved perfect financial advisor.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then my EI ran out in October of that year. So the end of summer. And I moved back to Edmonton because I figured, well, Alberta, probably more work here. And I was looking for jobs in Kelowna to be a welder. And it was like half the amount that you make in Alberta. In BC, it was like $27 an hour for a journeyman. In Alberta, it was like $45 an hour. So I was like, well, I should go back home and maybe I'll come across a job or whatever. And then, I came back to Edmonton. Again, got followed up with by my buddy in Kelowna, the Calgary SMD there, the senior broker. And then eventually they passed. I don't know if they told me Greg was going to call me or whatever. They just passed my number along. And then Greg Chernak called me like 5 times. He's like, "Dude, like, come to the office, just see what we do." I was like, "Okay, man, like whatever. I'll come check out what you guys are doing if you just leave me alone." And came to the office, piqued my interest. And then I couldn't get started right away because I was so broke. I had no money. So I had to go get a welding job for a month or something. Then my first paycheck, ended up getting started, bought my textbooks. And 7 years later, kind of the rest is history. I make, double what I basically used to make in the oil field and have complete control of my time and kind of live in a sense, it's dream life, but I know that there's way more steps and kind of things to achieve, obviously, but it's pretty cool to look back and reflect back on, kind of that kind of storyline and kind of things that happened that led up to taking an opportunity and kind of running with it and seeing where it would go.
I didn't realize how similar our stories were. And the more that I listen to you and the more it's just like, I had no idea what was even possible. And you look at this life that you've been painted, this dream life, like, here's what it's supposed to look like. And then you meet a different person and they're like, "What about if it could be like this though?" And you're like, "I didn't even know that was possible." Like, who knew? Right. And now it's like talking to people like Rich Thawley, for instance, who's one of the founders of our company. And he's like, "Hey guys, you got to think bigger, like get in the big, think in the big." And that's not something that is normal, right? Like normal would be me out on site listening to a radio of people complaining all day long. And yet you come home and you're just like, "I wonder why I'm so tired and like emotional." It's because you're taking on all of those people's energy, right? Like taking on all of that stress. But when you're going through it and you don't realize what's possible or what's coming, it's like, there's so many more steps to hit, like you were talking about earlier, and you don't know what you don't know. And I think when you're in that place and you're given that opportunity and you're like, I'm going to just be open-minded, or I'm going to trust my gut for this one. And
Yeah.
even if people are telling you you're an idiot, or I had one lady go, "Oh, you'll be back. You'll miss the money," when I quit my job. And I was like, "Oh, that is some fuel for my fire." Like, I'm going to go and just light it up and be like, "Hey, watch this." Right.
Yeah.
It's so crazy what you can accomplish when you set your mind to it and you're just like, "Hey, this is what I'm going for." And then you hit what you thought you could achieve. And then you're like, "Oh, I can do
Hmm.
way more than that." Like, I thought my career was going to be like making 100 grand a year. And like, that's all I would want. And yet when you get there, you're like, "Oh, we got a long ways to go, man." Like, there's so much
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
to learn and there's so much
But
more.
that's one of the coolest things about entrepreneurship too, is that you're never capped, right? You can always keep going and get bigger and, increase your revenue and your cash flow and all that sort of stuff. Where I think the world, right? We are kind of talking about, you don't know what you don't know, that most people, they grow up in an employee sort of world, and their parents or their cousin, their auntie works a specific industry, and it seems like that they have a great life and a great career, but that's all they know, right? Oh, nursing or teachers or oil field construction, whatever it is, kind of the typical ones. And if you know nothing about entrepreneurship, you're just like, okay, yeah, okay, if I get into this career, oh, okay, construction, you can make 100 grand, then that's your cap. And that's what you think your life is supposed to be like, or what I guess the peak of it can be like, is that sort of income and whatever that income can give you. But
Mhm.
yeah, once you get into the entrepreneurial world, it's just uncapped, and it's just so cool when you hit those milestones. You keep growing and keep wanting to get to that next level, kind of touch the greatness of what is possible. And then just knowing that it is possible. I mean, it's a scary thought in one sense, because it's completely up to you to do that and challenge yourself and get uncomfortable. But in another sense, it's complete bliss and joy and freedom just to know that you have that opportunity, right?
Mhm. Exactly. And I think that is one thing that everyone desires, is freedom. And freedom, like they say, is not free. It is not free. It takes blood, sweat, and tears, man. And like repetition, 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 repetition. When you fall over, you have to pull yourself out of the hole, get cleaned off, and like, okay, next, like, let's
Yeah.
get back at it, because everything is on you. And it was so funny. I was doing a pre-interview earlier today, and he's like, "Yeah, what people don't understand is when you're an entrepreneur, you're always on. Like, you're
Mhm.
just, I mean, you can be intentional on turning your phone off and not paying attention to it, or whatever, going on airplane mode is what I call it. Um, so that's being super intentional with your family, or super intentional with your friends when you're in that environment and stuff like that. Um, but you just learn what you want your life to look like. And it's like, no, I want to be able to exercise every day, or like, I want to be able to cook for myself. I want to be able to take my dog for a walk. I want to be able to, have this life. And what that takes for me is making calls and talking to people and actually prospecting and actually building my business and doing stuff in my community, and
Mhm.
you know just being there for my family as well. Like, my mom called me yesterday and she's like, "Alaina, when are you coming home?" I'm like, "Can I just be home for 1 minute?" Like, I just want to be in my own house, like, I
Yeah.
miss being home. And everyone's like, "Oh, it's so luxurious, you travel all the time." And I'm like, "Yeah, it is really great. We had a ton of fun in Mexico, right?" But it's so interesting when you're in it, and you have to kind of pinch yourself and be like, "Hey, know that you're in it right now."
Mhm.
So I have my buddy Jeremy called me this morning from South Africa, and he's in our business as well, and he's like, "Alaina, I'm just like so excited." He's like, "I've got my plan for how I'm going to work in South Africa and like run my Alberta business while I'm on vacation." And I'm like, "Dude, this is incredible, right?" And I remember the time that he was like complaining to me and just being like, "This is so hard and whatever." And I said, "So paint me a vision of what you have as your dream." And he said, "I want to run my motocross business, and I want to run this business and be really good in my community and be a financial advisor and be able to spend time with my wife and all that kind of stuff." And I said, "So what you're telling me is that you're living the dream." And he just was like, "Huh, I am." I was like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, man, like, this is it. This is what you've been aiming for, and you're doing it." So you kind of have to like have someone else have that conversation with you sometimes and just be like, hey, you're doing everything that you need to be doing, or you're living your dream life, and like high five. Because when you're in that place like yourself, when you're like, oh no, I'm going to be a professional hockey player. Well, you don't know what's going to happen or what opportunity is going to come your way. And hey, maybe you play hockey for charity now, like you do, and stuff like that, instead of doing it for money. And this is one of the big takeaways that I want people to understand, is that you can do something for money, but it's very different when you start doing it for money if it was something that you enjoyed first, right? So like for myself, I became a pastry chef, and I was like, I'm gonna be the best pastry chef ever. Then I got carpal tunnel, and I was like, well, I can't do that anymore. That was dumb. Like spent all this, time, 3 years going to school to be a pastry chef to make people fat and give them diabetes, and I'm like, oh, this is the path that I chose. But then I pivoted and got another opportunity, and then ended up in the position I'm in today. And I'm like, wow, it's so crazy how one conversation sparks another conversation, conversation. And then it just snowballs, and you're like, wow, look at the impact we're making now. And imagine if you were still a hockey player.
Yeah.
How different would your life be?
And just like, I had that conversation actually with my best buddy. Him and I played pretty good level hockeys, and he's in real estate now. He's very successful, has a bunch of rental properties too, and passive income coming in, and does all that stuff. And we've reflected back on that. We're like, man, what if like in our early 20s we still pursued hockey? Like, what kind of like dicks would we be? Because like you have a big ego when you're a professional athlete, and you get everything given to you, and you're front page of the paper and all that kind of stuff. And we, because we were humbled obviously by some setbacks, whatever, in our careers. And we talk about that all the time. We're like, man, like who would we be, and what would our lives look like if we actually pursued that and kept playing for another 10 years or whatever? Like we're so grateful obviously for the experiences, a lot of our like personalities and outgoingness and stuff like that came from, pursuing it and getting to the point that we were at. But if anybody plays sports, like, there's so many politics that come into it and whatever, at any level that you go to. So, you really do have like, a lot of people, like athletes have big egos, and, they're really, a lot of them, some of them are great people, but a lot of them are dicks, to be completely honest. And they don't really, you can't relate to like the everyday kind of person and all that. So we reflect back on that all the time, but it's so cool to reflect back on our experiences, whether it's work or, friendships, relationships, or sports that we played, and the people that we met, on who it shapes us for those opportunities that do arise. You just never know what's going to come in the future, right?
Yeah. So the first time that Z told me that she saw something special in me, or like Greg told me I had the X factor, and I was just like, clearly like winning at life now. But I had never really had anyone like believe in me or like mentor me outside of my family before. And I was like, so all I saw as an example of success is a single mom raising 4 kids, like trying to make it work. And I'm like, okay, you know what that bred? 4 entrepreneurs, right? Because we watched our mom hustle, and we watched her like, keep yourself busy, I have to go to work, or like, I got to cook you dinner because you crazy children eat everything. Right. And I'm like, yeah, but it taught us how to be independent. It taught us how to just like thrive in communication, because we had to learn really quickly how to do stuff like sales, because we didn't have the money to be going to Christian summer camp when we were kids, So I got my first sales job when I was like, maybe like 8 years old, selling spices door to door. And that's where it all started, like delivering newspapers. I was like, okay, what can we do to make money? And so I don't think my mom knew she was an entrepreneur, nor does she own a business or run a business. But it was so interesting to see like what came of that, right? Because Alaina, you should be a doctor. You're so smart. And I'm like, I don't like blood, and I have white coat syndrome. Like, why would I be a doctor? Like, that doesn't make sense for me. But then I go to be a pastry chef, and it's like, cool. Yeah. You're following your dreams. And then all of a sudden it's, oh, you're $7,000 in debt, and good luck getting out of that. You're making $14 an hour. And I'm like, oh, this is good. Right. So I moved to Fort McMurray, and same thing. It was, not good work environment. And I was just getting frustrated. And then I met Felix, who introduced me to Zale. And I was just like, whoa, so different. When I'll never forget when she's like, just read this book. And I was like, read a book? Like, I was just like, so like not there mentally.
Yeah.
And she said, it's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways by Susan Jeffers. And I read that book and holy cow, it changed my life. Like I started putting, I am confident with a photo of myself on the fridge so that I wouldn't go and eat the shitty foods that I wanted, or like I am loved on my like bathroom mirror. So when I'm feeling depressed or feeling down, it would just help me like pull myself out of it. And then I was like, wow, someone actually cares, like someone actually wants to help me. And then from there, I got access to Greg, which is your trainer, and he's amazing. And just so humble and kind and wants to be generous and like, hey, someone's got to do it right. Like we're going to build a business the right way and not take advantage of people and not, leave people behind. It's like, we're going to do it the right way. And now we've built such a great culture in our environment. And I love it because you go to these events and you sit around with people who are building the same company and you're all competing, right? Because we're all independent. But it's like, hey, I can call you and be like, Ben, come do my podcast with me, or like, hey, I want people to hear your story. And it's so amazing that everyone's just there to help each other and collaborate. And I think, I don't know about you, but I think mentorship has a huge part of success when it comes to being an entrepreneur. Do you have any examples of that kind of stuff, mentorship?
Yeah, well, I mean, just in life, I think we have all these little impressions growing up of what we want, right? Our superheroes and people we look up to, and whether it's professional athlete or it's someone we see on TV or an actor or whatever it is, and they have so many impressions on us. But it's like in our everyday kind of lives, there's people that come along that have big impacts, whether like you recognize it right away or you can look back on it and be like, oh, you know what? That person, like just their personality and how they treat people, and they impacted me in this way, and this other person impacted me here. So yeah, I mean, throughout my life, there's been lots of people. I mean, fortunate enough for me, like I was in those kind of coaching environments and the team environments. So I mean, there's teammates that I had, right, just really good guys that have moved on to become like principals and, superintendents of these big jobs, and, successful people in other areas of their life that I still lean on and look up to and talk to, right? There's people that I see them have incredible family lives, and, I don't have any kids or a spouse right now. So it's something that obviously like I'm kind of keeping note of for down in the road. I'm going to definitely have more conversations with them. And then there's the business people, and there's people in the fitness world. So there's different people, obviously, that have had big impacts for sure. To name some, I mean, I can't really think. Obviously, like Greg is just immediately, because we're kind of talking about the business side of things. That's been obviously a huge instrumental part for me in so many ways. Just he's he grew up playing hockey too, so he like kind of gets it, and he we were related big time on that side of things. And when he got in the business, he was single with no kids, just like myself. And so we've been able to relate on so many different kind of tiers along life. And then he's like, obviously he makes a couple $1 million a year. So it's cool that I can kind of follow a path like that. And I mean, it was just so fortunate, I guess, that my number got passed along to him, whatever the circumstances were that lined up and whatever happened. And he was in a position to actually like want to call me and then take me under his wing and all that sort of stuff. Right. So,
yeah. And I was pointing at my photo with Mr. Ed Milet here as well. Because, oh man, when I started listening to his podcast, it changed everything for me. Like I would listen to him on my haul truck for 12 hours a day and just like, you can be Uncle Eddie. Like, I'm okay with that. Like you can be my uncle and teach me everything you know, because my uncles are all like old and dead now. And that's, I need to learn from somebody, I want to learn from someone who's done it and who's been successful in business. And it's so cool to see people who are actually going out and adding value and going, hey, we're going to do everything we can to get you access to the information you need to be successful. So that's why I started the show.
Yeah. And it's crazy because I mean, when we were growing up, like I don't know how old you are. I'm 33, so I was born in
Me
1990.
too.
So yeah, when we were growing up, like there was no real like internet or podcasts or like these kind of things to be able to access, like your hero on TV or whatever, right?
Mm.
So your mentors were like people in your community or like the teams you played at, the church that somebody goes to, like those were like your immediate mentors. But now it's so cool with technology how you literally, yeah, like Ed Milet and like Rich Tholley and Gary Vaynerchuk and whoever, Andy Frisell, all these guys, they literally at your fingertips. And like, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of generalized kind of like coaching and podcasts they do and ideas, but so many of them have like, Q&As, or you can go to one of their events and you can meet them, or you could, I'm sure if you sent Andy, 15 messages in a row, like online, obviously they have people that run their social medias, but you bug these guys enough, like you can probably get your own direct questions or go meet them at an event in a hallway and just talk to them for 10 minutes sort of thing. And those impressions, and then obviously having access to those podcasts it's everything. I mean, sure, there were books back in the day. I didn't read any books though, right? Just like you, like Greg gave me a book. He's like, read Entrepreneur Roller Coaster. I'm like, a book? Yeah. I'm like, I don't read books. I watch sports highlights. I go to sporting events. But it's cool because and that's something that I hope actually is that more athletes start to create podcasts and, maybe like mentor, some of the younger generation, like the 8, 10, 12-year olds, and kind of talk about what their routines were and stuff. Because there's like hockey podcasts like Spit and Chicklets. It's kind of like a funny podcast. You learn about the lifestyle and stuff, but there's not like actual like mentorship type of programs. And yeah, I think that would be, hopefully it'll get around to that. And maybe somebody listens to this podcast and they get inspired to start one of those. I know my gym, I go to the gym downtown in Edmonton called Archetype, and it's like a athletic gym. And the guy who runs it and owns it, Simon Bennett, he actually used to be the personal trainer for the Edmonton Oilers. Then he branched out, and it's right across the street from the stadium. But he started this kind of speaker series where he has ex-athletes come on and talk about, yeah, like their journey up. And, like there's one coming up next week where he's got like a nutritionist and dietitian and an Olympic athlete, and they're coming to speak to the next generation. And so, that's like a live event they only do every month or two. But, how cool would it be if, somebody like Mario Lemieux or Wayne Gretzky or somebody like started a podcast and kind of talked about all these different things, right? But I mean, you talk about MLA, we have that in the business world. The business world is super, so many people give back to it and want to see just more people succeed and kind of make the world a better place in a sense, right? But
well, look at Ed's story. So cool. He was an athlete as well. Like he played professional baseball, right? And then it's like, nope, hurt his shoulder, no more baseball career. Like it can just get taken away from you in a second. And if you're not prepared for that, it's very interesting. And people are like, oh, well, what am I going to do now? Like I had one client be like, oh, they fell off a ladder, carpenter, fell off a ladder, landed on his hand, literally can't do carpentry ever again in his life, can't hold a hammer, right? And he's like, well, what am I going to do? I'm like, that's a good question. Like you probably should have had disability insurance, or like something like that, right? But it's just sad to see that people are out there and they're not getting to where they want to be, or they're not having the right conversations. And I think that when you're going out and like you said, like how cool would it be to have a podcast of athletes from someone who's done it, right? And someone who's putting in that time to go, hey, this is what your life's going to look like. And I love that about our business and the fact that I can just go, hey, what's it going to look like in 10 years? That if I do what he did, and that's pretty cool because then it's the picture's already painted for what you're creating, right? You don't have to come up with all of these ideas and be this entrepreneur who starts this, multi-billion-dollar company for a widget, like, yeah, I don't know. You don't have to just have like a one-off product that you sell. But if you can add value to people want to do business with you. I think that's, again, why I started the show. I wanted people to get to know me a little bit and go, hey, this is actually how this person is. Like, I'm not just BSing people being like, hey, no, I care about you. like I want to see you win. I want to see you successful. I mean, there are days when I go, Ben Hilborn's numbers are better than mine. And I just get very angry. but then I look at it and I'm like, oh, but I have a different life than you do. Right. And it's like, hey, well, we both have lots of trophies. Right. But at the same time, I can call you and be like, hey, I need help with this conversation, or I need help with this piece of business. And I know that that's a very valuable piece of having a business opportunity that's working for you and being successful, is having someone to bounce ideas off of, and having a mentor, and just like someone who's willing to go, hey, you're not doing what I know you're capable of doing. You should step it up. I'm coming for you. Right. And it's cool to just have that collaboration.
Yeah. And I think, so to tie in like two things to those comments is so with that stuff you're just talking about, like we're super fortunate because we work with a firm and a company that it's kind of like automatic. You have these associations just through being on Zooms and big classes and the big events that are already set up for us. So you naturally gain these associations. But I think kind of in the normal world, right? You think about it, when you were hauling trucks and doing pastry and I was working as a welder, and you don't have necessarily associations of people that have like that different or better life that you want to have. And so you have to go out and seek it. And unfortunately, so many people don't. I don't know if they're intimidated, if they're scared, and they don't reach out and kind of chase after, the guy, who has that fitness page with 100,000 followers that seems really successful and they want to be a personal trainer. They don't go out and put themselves out there to earn that association, I guess, in a sense, where we were fortunate enough, again, to get into just an environment that naturally has that stuff, which is very, very unique in the world. But yeah, I think just like the common person doesn't necessarily have that. So that, again, it kind of ties back to the podcast, and at least having an idea, or if, picking up a book, or, you can follow an Instagram page and somebody recommends a book, you pick up that book, it can literally change your life through that association. Because how I look at reading now is that you're basically sitting there hanging out with a multimillionaire for like half an hour or an hour while you read a book. I used to think of it as like work, and like, oh, like Greg tells me to read 10 pages a day. And I used to look at it as kind of like work, and, as something I had to do. And, the odd book, I would enjoy it and learn. But now I view it more from the perspective of my associations. I'm hanging out with this extremely successful person, just having a conversation like this and kind of shooting the shit and hearing their story and all that sort of thing. So that was one thing I wanted to mention. And second was, you talked about like, that guy breaking his hand and, Ed playing baseball and all this. That I think so many people tie their identity to what they used to do, and their whole life, revolves around that, which makes sense, right? That's how you make a living. That's what you do 7 days a week, right? It's like, it's who you are. And then I see it so often, and it sucks to see. It's sad to see from like people that I know from like high school and that I used to play hockey with and things like that. And 10 years, 15 years after that sport, that job, whatever, you see it in relationships. Somebody's like broken hearts, it's like, get over it, man. Like there's way more people in the world, right? And but the thing is that, yeah, so many people attach their identity to these past jobs or careers or sports, whatever that they were involved in. And, I can even admit myself, when I stopped playing hockey, like I gained like 30 or 40 pounds. I was like fat, working the trades. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, who am I? And then I kind of like clicked. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I'm an athlete. Like, athletes go to the gym. They don't eat like crap all the time, be overweight. And so it took a little bit of time to kind of recognize it. And I think like, I don't know what, maybe one of my friends like called me out or something. And he's like, hey man, like you're gaining some weight. I'm like, oh shit. Yeah, I am. I should do something about this. But then you got to get uncomfortable again. And then it comes down to associations, taking advantage of opportunities that do come about, but also searching and going out for that sort of thing. Instead of just being like stuck. It's like, oh, I broke my hand. I'm a carpenter. I'm just going to be like a lazy bum living on EI and my unemployment and WCB or whatever forever. It's like, well, it's a hand. Like you still have the mind to train carpenters. You can become a teacher. You could branch out and start a business, and there's so many other things that somebody could do with those same skill sets in the same industry or a different industry. And, it really comes down to, not settling for an average and like staying the same, right? And like actually wanting to improve and get better and learn new things and make a bigger impact. I think like the longer that I'm around in this business, it's making a bigger impact. Cause when I first started, it was selfishness that like, oh, I need to replace my income and I want to have, this much money and travel and do this stuff myself. But now it's about making a bigger impact. It shifts, right? As you find success in whatever path that people have, right?
Yeah. I'll never forget. I thought I was motivated by money. And like you're saying, people focus on either money or impact typically. Like when they're looking at a career opportunity, it's either I do it because I love it or I do it for the money. Right. Mm-hmm. And so when I was a pastry chef, I was just like, I really can't see myself doing this long term. Like I was scooping 1,000 cookies a day. You think that's fun? Like, no, man, it's terrible. And then you're just like, this is my life for the next 30 years. And you're like, no, I can't see myself doing that. And so you switch careers and then you're like, okay, well, this is different, but it's still not what I want. And you just learn to develop what you want your identity to look like. And this is something I was dealing with this week too, redefining my identity, because the person I was yesterday is not the person I am today. And the person who has had the life that I've had is me. And like, it's made me to be the person that I am today. And if I didn't have all of those hardships and I didn't have all of those stories to go back and be like, this is what I dealt with, or this was my life, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so you have to find that gratitude for yourself for being the one to go, hey, you're doing the work, you're putting in the time, you're continuing to get up in the morning, even when you're struggling, or like helping someone who's in depression. Like, hey, it's okay to be in depression. Like it's an emotion, right? You're feeling depression. What are you going to do to get out of it? What can you do to change your vibration level? And like, being an athlete, you go from being like, oh man, I don't want to do this, to being like, yeah, that was good. Like that was a really good workout. And you just feel invigorated after that. You feel alive. And I know that I've literally, the last couple of days, I've been waking up and just like having visuals of me like squatting in the gym, and I'm like, I gotta go. I gotta go. Because yoga is great. And walking my dog in a foot of snow that we just got the other day is great, but it's not the same as weight training. It's not the same as like going in and breathing hard and sweating and like feeling that like the raw energy that you get when you exercise. And so I know that for myself, redefining my identity includes living a healthy lifestyle. So whatever that is to me, right? Like being able to meal prep is a big part of my day, right? I like being prepared for that kind of stuff, or else I overeat or I eat shitty foods that I shouldn't be having, like the tiramisu cheesecake I had the other day that was delightful. But I did 2 workouts, right? And I'm like, okay, well, how am I incorporating my water on a daily basis? How am I taking care of myself? So my affirmations are happy, healthy, wealthy, free, right? And I'm like, if I can have those things, happiness, health, wealth, and freedom, I can change the world, right?
Totally,
I don't know.
Yeah. And I think to tie into that is redefining your identity and like who you want to be. It can seem like a huge monumental shift, right? If it's like something completely different than what your past does look like, or your current situation. So I think the most important thing is like what you're talking about, it's celebrating the small wins along the way. And I know, one little thing for me that literally like I'm still not a morning person per se. Like 5 a.m. club, not me. But I used to like, be my own boss and choose my own hours. I honestly used to like sleep till 10 or 11 o'clock, like in the morning. And then I'd be like, oh, I work evenings, whatever. But then I listened to a podcast, or I saw a video clip or something of is Admiral McRae or whatever his name is, talk about making your bed every morning. And I started doing that. I didn't do it every day, but I would wake up and make my bed, because I never did for years, ever. I would never make my bed. And I did that. And I listened to his podcast. I probably listened to his podcast, or that little video. I think it was a 5-10 minute video clip on YouTube. And then I got to see him in person do that speech too in Vegas. And it's completely changed it. And now I'm like, I'm not a morning person, but I'm like, boom, like when my alarm goes off, I'm up and I'm excited. And then when I make my bed, it's such an accomplishment that starts my day off in the right way.
Mhm.
And then same thing the night before, if I lay out my suit and I meal prep and I've, like my pre-workout, like, on the counter, and then I wake up, I make my bed, boom, like my,
Shoes
my
are on.
breakfast, like everything's there. It's like win, win, win. And it's like, this is getting me to that new identity that I want, the person I want to be.
Mhm.
Right. So it's like, it's all these little, and you're not going to be perfect every single day, but it's, whatever, in a playoff hockey series, 7 days or 7 games, right? Well, if you win 4-7, you win the series and you move on. So that's how I kind of like to look at each week too. So of course I want to go 7 for 7. There's weeks when I do, and I just feel boom, invigorated. I feel like a boss, right? On weekends when I'm just crushing it, going to the gym, 8 o'clock on a Saturday, everybody's, going to the bar and stuff like that. Big win. But it's like, even in my shitty weeks, as long as 4 days, 5 days, I can still have those wins, and you're starting to shift towards, that new identity and the person you want to be in the future. It's not going to be an overnight shift, but it's gradually, week after week, month after month. You look back 6 months later, a year later, you're like, okay, I am starting to become this person. I can be this person. I like it. Right. And sometimes you don't like it and you're like, well, shit, no, I'm going to go back to this and that. Maybe I'll just keep this part of the new person I wanted to be or whatever. Right.
Yeah. Well, even like this last convention that we did in Banff, I didn't get any trophies. And I was just like, like just like a big coyote bear. And I was like, this is bullshit. And then I was like, wait, I really didn't do much last year, and I was like, I didn't earn it. But it was so interesting because I have that identity of a champion and like that identity of a winner and someone who's like always cleaning house with trophies, always being number one. And then you are humbled because you're like, no, you didn't do the work, or like you didn't put in that time last year because I spent more time writing my book or working on my podcast or, like taking care of my health because I had a terrible year last year when it came to my health. And I was just like, okay, well, I'm going to figure it out, right? I'm going to figure it out. And so my 2023 is my year of mastery, right? Last year, it was a year of simplicity, figuring out what I needed and what was like essential to my energy, my growth, my personal development. And then this year, I'm like, all right, let's make it happen. Like this is mastery 101. So I think shifting that identity and just making that decision for yourself is so crucial. And it's a decision every single day, every single meal, every single time that you go to the gym versus eating a cookie. You're deciding to be that version of yourself that's just better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And at any point, what a lot of people don't think about or realize, because again, going back to like attaching yourself to your old identity or the old person you are, or whatever career job, all that kind of stuff, is that you can literally write a new chapter like that. Like literally decide today, like tomorrow I'm doing this. Like, when I leave the office, I'm going to go grab salads instead of like a lasagna for dinner. And you make that decision. And then you start writing your new chapter. And it's like, I'm going to cut out this association from my life. I'm going to stop wasting money, doing skip the dishes, going to the bar, right? Wasting money at hockey game. Like this was a shift that I had recently in the new year. Was I don't know, like, where I live downtown. I go to a lot of hockey games because it's so convenient. It's right there. I get last minute tickets, but I go and drink 3 beers at the game. I'm like, boom, there's like $200, right? And so, because it was entertaining to me. It was something that I love, but I shifted my mind because I want to get back into like elite shape where I used to be, right? Back in my early 20s. And so I've shifted my mindset that I rather spend $200 on like gym, like classes, group classes. So I have like a group there to like keep me motivated and keep me accountable, but also to like spend it on healthier food and nutrition. And like, I'm looking at getting a nutritionist or dietitian or something to like really dial in that kind of stuff. So I'm already spending the money. I'm just wasting it on like bad habits, my old identity, instead of the new identity, new chapter that I want moving forward in my life. It's literally just like you recognize it. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to start. Boom. I went and got like a group gym membership. that I do 3 times a week instead of just like working out by myself. And I literally, the days like today, I went this morning, my whole day is so different than it was yesterday when I didn't go to that class to start my day, sort of thing. So yeah, it's just so cool how you can make that shift like so easily. It's just deciding you want to do it. And yeah, you try it out and don't have the perfect weeks. Well, whatever. Keep at it, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to do it 7 days a week. Do it twice a week at whatever. Eat salads twice a week instead of 0 times a week if it is health or whatever, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's so important. Yeah. I love that you finish it off like that. We're out of time, but it's been a really, really good conversation. And I'm really grateful that you were able to be here today. And I want people to get more access to you. So where can they reach out to you and get more content from you?
Social media is like I go on Instagram, just my name, Ben Hilborn, Hilborn. That's my go-to that I spend a lot of time on, but I also am thinking about shifting off social medias here real soon. Like I thought about it last year.
Interesting.
And I think it's one of those things the next like probably year or two, I'm going to get off social media like completely and or like start with maybe Facebook and then we'll see. Yeah. But it's one of those like mental shifts that I'm working on. Can't quite commit to it yet. But yeah, I love having conversations. Feel free to reach out, shoot a message, voice note, and can shoot the shits.
Beautiful. I love it. Okay. Well, that's it for today, you guys. If you got value out of the show, make sure you share the show with a friend, tell someone about it. And we're in 27 countries, aiming to hit 40 countries this year at least. As the beginning of the year, so we can do it. I love that we're growing and expanding and making things happen. So that's it for today. Thanks again, Ben. Pursuit of Relentless, signing out.